I'm thinking it'd be good for me to start now. I'm Geoff Sayre-McCord. I'm the director of the PPE Society and the principal investigator for the PPE Society Research Consortium that was made possible thanks to generous support from the John Templeton Foundation. Um, As you all know, I'm assuming we did our first call for proposals, and the proposal process is two stages. We asked for short proposals. Those are reviewed, and then a subset of those are invited to submit full proposals to the second stage. The design is meant to let the investment to be considered not be especially high. And then the second stage, once you get a little feedback, once we talk, once you talk with colleagues in your universities, uh, there's a chance to really put together a tight and successful, one hopes, proposal. I should say the people in the room right now, I'm assuming, are either people who submitted a short proposal, did not get invited to do a second proposal, but are interested in submitting for the second stage. Interested in submitting in response to the second call. And other people in the room are people who were invited to do the second stage, and they're here to get a little bit more advice and background concerning what we're looking for in those more substantive proposals. Um, I'd like to keep everything I'm saying and the specific questions you guys ask at the end or after my short presentation as much as possible, not specific to a particular proposal or project. So if you have questions, think about the aspect of the question that would be of general interest to people in the room. I will make myself available with office hours next week that will be advertised to talk about more specific questions and strategies as you would like to have them raised and maybe answered by me. So right now, I'm just going to talk about the round one, what we saw as strengths and challenges when people submitted their short proposals. Um, we we ended up with many more proposals than we thought we would get. Not quite 300, but much closer to that than we had thought. And we've invited about 25% of the short proposals to do the second stage. I want to talk about the things that we're really looking for, that we looked for in the short proposals, but in the short proposals, sometimes we invited to the second stage proposals that we thought were hugely promising, even though they missed one or another of these things. So these are the, as we're calling them right now, the three pillars of success, the three things that are a major preoccupation with us in evaluating the second stage. The first is we're looking for proposals that have as projects research problems or questions or goals that genuinely integrate multiple disciplines. Um, so it's not enough just for one discipline to pick up a topic that's normally discovered or explored or studied by another discipline. That doesn't make it, for the purposes of this project, integrated PPE. We really want projects that rely in their design on bringing together tools and insights and theories that come from different disciplines and that are such that it becomes clear bringing those all together allows us to much better understand how to solve a problem or how to answer a question than any of the disciplines working alone could do. So that's one thing we're paying a lot of attention to. The second thing is, and this we were in the first stage, medium lenient on, clear, substantial deliverables as well as outcomes. The deliverables are the things that will be outputs from the project that can be passed on and shared. I'll talk about that a little bit more. The outcomes, and the outcomes are pretty important, but often hard to measure and often much less clearly going to be an outcome of the project. And that's changes in culture or starting a new research initiative or consolidating interests in a community around a topic that before this project did what it was proposing to do and offered its deliverables just wouldn't have come together. And then the final thing is we have a limited amount of money and we got a really satisfying, surprising number of excellent proposals. And I'll say a little bit about their distribution across the funding range. But if we were to fund at just the top level of the funding window we have to offer, we would only be able to fund a couple of handfuls of projects. But there are many, many projects we want to support that are way under that price. So we're part of what we need to do is put together a diverse portfolio of projects we're investing in. And so once you get excellent projects, one of the ways to set up that portfolio is to look at cost benefit exchange for them. And so I'll talk a little bit about ways people might think of reducing their ask for funding from us while still pursuing their project. Always not very comfortable in this mode. Okay. So I think just to flag a couple of things that we are looking for. There were some multidisciplinary teams, but it just wasn't clear that how the project was working called for that group. It wasn't clear how their distinctive tools and insights were playing a key role in the project's goals. So with that in mind, I think it's important to pay attention to how the different disciplinary skills and methods and insights contribute to the value of the project, such that you can explain why having each of these people makes a big difference to achieving what you're after. So ask yourself, would removing one or another of the disciplinary perspectives fundamentally undermine the project? Does each discipline contribute distinctive methodology or a key perspective to what you're doing? And are you able to articulate what each discipline contributes in a way that shows why it's important to the project? So for round one, we were looking for clear vision of the deliverables and their value with an articulation of how the people thought they might achieve those deliverables. In the second round, we want detailed articulation of the deliverables and of the means that you have in place in the project, if it's funded, to ensure that you achieve them. So what matters for round two specifically are things such as, if it's publications, which journals or publishers and which contributors would be involved, a timeline that's reasonable, and a dissemination plan for getting the articles to the journals and for them to be published. And finally, confirmed commitments. Publishers that write, we're very seriously interested in this book, or we're very keen to publish a set of articles in the journal. Then, in thinking about the deliverables, and this is color coded green, yellow, red, um, highly valued deliverables include and are not exhausted by journal articles, special issues, edited volumes, books, data sets, policy reports, pedagogical materials, impactful public facing articles, and podcasts. So things where there's a a clear thing that will be accomplished, the value of which you can articulate and help people appreciate. Things that are valued, but that depend on their context and what they're connected to, are workshops and conferences with confirmed participants and publication outlets. But uh, when we're talking about publication outlets, just clear case that there are possible venues where the product of the workshop or the conference will find its expression and find a way to be shared. Not sufficient on their own, period, are just workshops and conferences without clear deliverables, networks built but without products, or podcasts without plans, just to pick various cases. So um, it's not that these aren't workshops and conferences aren't very important. They are often crucial. It's not that building networks is not a highly valued outcome, but it doesn't really show up much as a deliverable. And podcasts without plans, just proposing to address certain issues, is too amorphous to really have a lot of confidence in their uh, being produced. So let me get to the third pillar, the cost benefit. We're calling it cost benefit excellence. Things that we notice that are just worth paying attention to is some proposals. And again, the way we looked at it is if any of these were true of you, that didn't mean that's why we didn't ask you to move to the second round. We asked some proposals to move to the second round that had one or another of these things, with us suggesting they look carefully at it to increase the competitiveness of their proposal. So some had unusually high honoraria without any real explanation of why it was so high. That's something that's worth paying attention to. Honoraria are not compensation. Uh, the honoraria are specifically a way of honoring and acknowledging the contribution, but not meant to compensate for the time. And it's especially appropriate in any context where the people are doing a project they want to do anyway. And in doing it, they're advancing their career and their goals. You're not pulling them away from that to do something else. In those cases, honoraria rather than time off paid is often a way to save money. But we noticed there were some high honoraria, so we wanted to flag that. Course releases, again, that the question there is a course release the right size of time in the right kind of chunk to be supportable for the kind of money it takes? So course releases all come both with the salary and all the benefits, the retirement benefits, in pretty big chunks. So there's an interesting contrast between summer salary, which again includes benefits, but it's an expandable or contractible amount of time. A course release or a semester release, those are big chunks. And so there needs to be a really clear case that's the right size chunk to ask for funding to cover. We also noticed in some cases, uh, what seemed to be projects that were graduate student supportive. These are projects the graduate students benefit by doing and want to do and coincide with their research plans. We're asking for funding at a level that was, in effect, a semester uh, research leave for them rather than teaching. And there's a real issue about whether, given the harmony between the project and what they're already being funded for, whether that's the right level of funding uh, to have in the final proposal. Another thing I just want to remind everyone of, we can't support more than 10% of our grant amount. We can't provide more than 10% of that for travel. That's compatible with us providing more than 10% for one project, but only if there's some other project or set of projects that requires less than 10% so that it balances out to 10%. So we strongly encourage people to do everything they can to figure out a way not to be asking us for more than 10%, because if they're more and there's no way for us to get compensating savings on other projects, that will be the reason or a reason we have to say no. Um, it's worth paying attention to travel being the kind of thing that home institutions from the various participants are often well placed to provide. It's also something that particular people who have travel funds already can commit to the use of this, and you can report that as part of the funding made available. It doesn't have to be that their coming not at your expense is invisible. It can be marked as some of the support provided by that person's other school for what you're doing. Finally, it's worth thinking about whether postdocs are the right way to get the skills you need for the project you're proposing. Often, postdocs are wonderful both for the project and the postdoc who's in them. But given the relatively small size of the top grants we're able to offer and the overall amount of money, postdocs tend to be quite expensive unless what we're doing is buying some time in conjunction with the home institution to pay for a postdoc who will be doing some things here and some things paid for by uh, our grant. So here are some ideas about uh, achieving some cost efficiency. Um, if you can get some cost sharing by the participants' home institutions, that's both a good signal to us and a good way to get funding that lets you do things like travel that we have a cap on what we're able to do. Also, many people ask for funds to help support open access, which is hugely valuable. It's worth checking and making sure whether your institution has what I gather is called a read and publish agreement with publishers. In some cases, there are such agreements in place that allows you to publish with one of these presses and be covered by that agreement. I don't know any of the details of that, but I just wanted to call that to your attention as one cost item, hugely valuable in all sorts of ways that may not need to be part of your proposal, depending on your institution. Also, because of our having to limit how many large grants we can give, one thing to do if you've been invited to a second round is think about elements in your proposal that would be freestanding worth doing, maybe as the setup to the next steps you were hoping to accomplish. And think about what sizes of those are worth proposing and worth doing if you get the funding. That would let you scale down the budget. Finally, and I've already basically alluded to this, be strategic about which funding requests you make and whether for research stipends or summer salary or semester buyouts. Um, that's a way to trim some significant money sometimes. And here are some ways that, and you can probably just infer this from everything I've said, that uh, proposals ended up not being invited for a second time. The proposed topics that certainly touch PPE, but the project wasn't described or designed in such a way that it actually brought the disciplines together in a way that would show the synergy between the disciplines. Another thing that happened is that there were really important ideas, important, as I call them here, strong research questions, but there wasn't on the team already identified cross-disciplinary expertise. Often there were several people who've done some interdisciplinary work, but they're all from a single discipline, and it didn't show up in the proposal how interdisciplinary that project would be. Often there were vague deliverables, either unclear outputs or unconfirmed contributors or an unrealistic or no timeline for them. And then finally, there were cases of budget opacity where we just couldn't tell what the costs, what the expenses were really going to be, or the rates were high, or there wasn't sufficient itemization, though we were not looking for a very detailed budget. The second round requires a quite detailed budget. Okay, so I think this is repetitive, so I'm going to skip over it in favor of questions. I wanted to just share this picture with you. This is the distribution, the percentage of the submissions we received asking for different amounts of money. So 36% asked for 125 to $150,000. If we supported people at 150, teams at 150, we'd only be able to support 8 proposals in this first call, first round. Um, and given that so many of the proposals that ask for less are clearly excellent with clearly really important deliverables, spending all that in a concentrated way doesn't make sense. So we're not going to do that. That doesn't mean we're not going to support some that are in this top range. Otherwise, we wouldn't have invited them to do a second stage. But there we're really keen on the mix of cost benefit excellence, investment from the home schools, clear efficiency in the design. Um, so it's just a higher uh, threshold to jump if you're in that top range. It's a little less high, but it's still high if you're in the 100 to 125 range. Gets much better below that. So this is a description of the gist of our requests to the people we invited to submit in the second stage. Reducing the budget, make sure travel funding is not over 10%, enhance the team you've proposed so as to more clearly and effectively do a PPE project, clarification on specific deliverables, and details of budget with, where available, serious buy-in from the home institutions or from other funders. There's some proposals that have dollar matching money, so that there's a source that'll match every dollar we put in. Thank you very much. What I'd like to do is open the floor, uh, turn on your cameras, raise your hand if you have a question. Please make sure it's a question that would be an answer to which would be helpful to other people in the room. If you're not in that situation, then look out for the office hours next week. So I thought I saw a hand up. I don't see any faces. Alan, you have a hand up? Alan
Yeah,
Hazlitt?
can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I can't see myself. Um, we were so the proposal that we were working on has like a team of researchers, and we were wanting to compensate them for time spent in the summer doing research on this project with like a flat rate stipend. Is that is that allowed? Is that something rather than a percentage of salary so that everyone would get the same amount? Is that like okay?
Yeah, it is okay, and it's a good way. You have to check with each of the relevant institutions, but um, as long as it's not treated as a buyout, it's treated as an honorarium or a research stipend or a research fellowship from you. It can take forms that let you get a flat rate that you think is reasonable.
Okay, yeah. And I think that's sort of why we were thinking of it as happening in the summer was that it wasn't interfering with anyone's normal duties. And there's sort of a technical question which maybe belongs in office hours, but like, do you have a sense of how you put that on the budget template? Because the budget template has percentage of time and salary. Um, I can probably ask this of someone other than you. It sounds like
Yeah, I think
I'll
that
send an
there.
email about this.
Yeah, there is a way to do this. You probably take whatever the stipend is and plug it in that piece, and it will give you you're doing the calculation to get an outcome, and you
Okay, okay.
backwards engineer it.
Okay, yeah, that's what we'll do.
Well, double check with us that that's right. But
Yeah, I'll double check or have the advancement guy do that. Hourly is similar question sort of for hourly entry on the template because we were going to hire like a student assistant at hourly. So it's not really a percentage of salary, but that's just a matter of putting on the site. Oh, one other thing was I noticed on the template that it said website is subject to special rules. Is there
hmm,
it was sort of like travel and lodging. I understand the 10%, but we were thinking of this. We were thinking the student assistant would manage the website. And so I just wanted to check that there was might be some rule about spending money on websites because we were thinking we'd set up a website and have various things on there,
I
curriculum
think I
materials.
don't know, so I shouldn't
Okay.
answer, but reach out and we'll try to get the right answer for you.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Sure, my pleasure. Melissa,
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
yes, I can.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is whether how to deal with currency fluctuations in the sense that we would be converting from dollars to euros.
Right.
So is there a way in which we could kind of hedge ourselves for that, given the situation right now with currency fluctuations? So that's the first question. The second question, when you mentioned team enhancement, I suppose that that could potentially mean that we bring more people than we already identified in our proposal. And my question is whether if that would lead to, for instance, an increase in the budget that we already presented, whether that would be allowed given that we consider it to be a justifiable item, let's say, to bring another person in, whether that would be okay.
It it would be. Let me let me emphasize though, we really are pretty cost conscious. So if you're adding a person because that'll strengthen it from the point of view of being genuinely PPE in a stronger sense, think about ways you might save money on the back end in other ways. Um, but it's not true that when we invited you to a second, we said the dollar amount you asked for is the only one you can ask for. You could justify asking for more or happily come in much less. Um, what we did is for the asking price, part of what we were doing was determining whether it was worth our time and your time to do the second round. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yes, thanks.
Okay. And uh, we got clear guidance on exchange rates. Everything we agree to is in the dollars, and that's what's paid. If it goes the wrong way, that means you end up with fewer euros. Wrong way from the point of view of your project.
Right.
And there's no way, there's nothing we can build in because we asked about this because we're also keen to do international support. And uh, the way to do it is settle on an ask for each of these things, taking account of the fact that there'll be some fluctuation.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Um, Nick Bird, I think your mic is off.
Hi.
Hi.
I wonder if you could just either say or maybe point us to what you're hoping for in terms of the scope of PPE. So it seems like each of the those fields, philosophy, and economics, etc., are like pretty diverse, and then the combination of them I find is kind of implemented in different ways in different like universities, for example. So is there like a clear statement of like exactly what you're hoping to count as PPE so we can get a better sense of like fitness?
I think the thing to say is we picked P, P, and E because of the value of a name brand. We think there are all sorts of cognate fields, public policy, urban studies, sociology, government departments, not political science departments, all of which come under the umbrella we're thinking about as potential participants in PPE. The idea of having the three letters together is the value of bringing those other disciplines together, or philosophy and those, or political science and those. So, what we're looking for is maybe somebody from a public policy context or a health policy context, thinking about solving some problem and turning to an economist who brings a new set of tools in, not the tools this public policy person was using, to evaluate and illuminate the policies that they're considering, think of new ways to meet the problem. So the way we're conceiving of it is not captured by one particular university's implementation of a PPE program, for instance. Um, but what is true is there are a lot of departments where people are themselves fairly interdisciplinary, but they do a kind of research that reflects that they're a sociologist. And there's a way of studying the economy that's uh, sort of a more sociological way than if you were a political scientist or than if you were an economist or a philosopher. So that's what we're looking for. It's not a particular blend. It's we found a problem. We realize our tools alone don't illuminate as well as we'd be able to if we collaborated with these other people. Does
Thanks.
that
That's really
help?
helpful, especially that emphasis on the benefit, it seems, of
Yeah,
interdisciplinarity.
right. We're
Thanks.
looking for something that's not, to use an old time phrase, normal science. We're looking for the cases where you can say and see what we've learned that we were not on a path to learn. Uh, Nils, am I saying that right?
Yes, very good.
Okay.
Thanks. Hi. My team members who couldn't be here, they gave me some questions to ask. So, do you want me all in one or one after another?
Are they questions my answers may have a good chance of being of general interest?
Yes, that's why I'm asking them.
Okay, well, give me two. Then
Okay.
I'll go to somebody else and then I'll come back.
Yeah. Or I give the first one is really, really, really quick and simple. So do you have a balance between academic and public facing output you would recommend? And is student teaching facing, is it something you would like to see?
So there's not whatever balance there would be is not a balance we expect from any particular proposal. So we want your proposals to be driven by purpose and ambitions, not trying to fit what we're after. We do value public facing work. We do value pedagogical materials. I should say we don't want to support the teaching of a course or a syllabus design for a particular program, partly because we see that as part of the normal work faculty should be doing in their institutions for new programs or new courses. But also, we're looking for things that constitute shareable deliverables. So, a syllabus for a new kind of course, there's reason to think a lot of people would be inspired and would use well. Um, so, that kind of pedagogical stuff we value very heavily. But funding for student facing teaching or course development is probably not very competitive for these grants.
Hmm. Can I have another question or?
Yes, you got two, and then I'll come back.
Okay. So the other one is in the form this specifies one outcome with the possibility of adding more. So we wondered a little bit if you would prefer an integrated story or rather like 3 or 4 outcomes separately, or should they somehow build maybe a coherent story?
I don't think they need to build a coherent story. You need to make a compelling case, and of course, dividing your attentions too broadly often is a predictor of not achieving very much, really. But a few select ones that the team works well on together that are quite different and don't complement each other. They just reflect the skill set you brought to bear. That's fine.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it's very, very quick. There
Hey,
just
that's cheating.
Well, that's a really quick one. So you just gave some what you recommend for people second round. Do you send these recommendations already, or should we go to your office hours next week, or when do we get
So
these
we did
recommendations? This specific one.
we did light touch recommendations in some of the letters. Not all of them got them. And I'm happy to talk to you in some detail, but it's important I'm not one of the referees.
Okay. Okay, great. So I stop here. Thanks.
Okay. Um, Antoine.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello? Now I can't. Your mic is off. Now it's on.
Ah, okay, weird. First, I wanted to ask if field work counted as travel um, in the 10% for the 10% rule.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Okay.
We'll try to find out. I
Um,
suspect it does, but I don't know that it does.
okay. And then would it be possible for students, for instance, that in the last year of their PhD have to apply for some sort of fellowship? So will it be possible to fund part of the funding of the last year of a PhD students through part of the fund that we are applying for here?
It is possible. The worry is part of what we're hoping to do is make possible kinds of research people are keen to do but weren't able to do. And so fellowships for graduate students to do what they're doing anyway in finishing their dissertation really doesn't fit under that. It gets trickier in funding contexts where without the funding, these graduate students wouldn't be able to do any work. Um, then it becomes a real case of making possible work that couldn't be done otherwise. But then the problem is if it's a single researcher doing a single project, it doesn't really meet the team idea. So, but I can well imagine it is part of a team, and what the student's doing with the fellowship is a crucial part of that team and not something that that student would be doing, but for the funding.
Okay, now that makes sense. And one last, sorry, very short question.
Okay.
When given that some of the deliverables, like for instance, let's say there's a team of four researchers, some in economics, some in politics, some in philosophy, some projects might be co-authored altogether, but some might be co-authored by a subset of these co-authors. So in what sense do the deliverables have to be PPE, given that some might be more PE, some might be more PP within the umbrella of project that the group would produce, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, one way to put it is one way we envisioned a team is a group of people who don't produce any collective product. They're still, as often happens, producing a particular product, single authored product, let's say, or as you're setting up, maybe a team of two. But the project is significantly enhanced that this one person's doing by the presence, interaction with, sharing ideas and approaches with the other people on the team. So it's the kind of thing, it might not rise to the level of a co-authored product, but where there's a heartfelt, clear, and permeating influence of the collaborator from the team on what was produced.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Sally.
Hi, Geoff.
Hey.
Thanks for this. So I have one very stupid question and then one more substantive. And the first one is just because I'm at MIT and they're used to charging overhead to scientists and engineers, and the overhead is incredibly high, and they tend not to reduce it for anybody.
Right.
And I've just never done this. So if it's way over 15%, say, do we just pay the rest of it out of our pocket?
Well, so we're just capped at 15, period.
Yeah,
And that's true of all our grants and all of Templeton's grants.
right.
So most schools I know about say we won't reduce the overhead unless the source doesn't pay anybody over that amount.
Yeah,
And then, but MIT, I know.
Okay. No, but I mean, I can try and raise money to cover the overhead, but we're talking like tens of percentages more.
Right. I understand that.
In terms of, because they're usually funding, paying for fancy, electron colliders or whatever the fuck they are doing, And so, yeah. All right, I'll figure that out.
But let me say something. I don't know if it'll be helpful, but you might think of having the home institution be one of your collaborators' institutions.
Yes, that's a good idea. Okay, good.
So,
okay, yeah.
We're not that I think can work with some people, and it might be the perfect way for you to go, which says,
Good point.
I have this great project. I wish I could have it funded here, but you guys make that impossible. It's being done over there.
Yes, that's very helpful. Oh, I knew you'd have some creative suggestions. So the other is we're working with a lab at MIT that is on this Women in Democracy project that is very oriented toward results on the ground in, for example, changing the involvement of women in the midterm elections, say. Okay, so in this particular lab, they don't publish very much. They're really like they do measurement and evaluation, but they don't end up publishing a lot. They just want to sort of see the results on the ground.
Right.
But it seems as though the outputs that you're looking for are all academic or public-facing podcasts and such like this, or articles. And I'm just, I mean, what we want to do is have an impact on the ground to make a difference. But it seems like we're going to have to promise to either have them write a paper describing the impact, or for us to write a paper describing the impact in order for it to count as an outcome.
So how much of what they or you would or do is shareable as opposed to deployable by them? So the more they're just saying, we have a way of doing this, we're going to try this, and oh, damn, that didn't work. Let's try, oh, that worked. And they're just doing that. They're not studying it. They're
studying
learning.
it. They have, I mean, they do it. There's a methodology. And the methodology, so I'm one of the people who's trying to get more of this out there in the world about the methodology and how impactful it is. And they do have measurement and evaluation instruments that they use to
Right.
correct for the mistakes that get made. But it turns out like they don't do a lot of publishing of this. And so, but it's not really my expertise exactly. And so maybe co-authoring, we could figure out a way to co-author something. But it's a tricky, I mean, as you might imagine, these sorts of things can be kind of tricky across different sorts of units that
Right.
have different goals and objectives. And I don't want to promise something that will require their commitment. They're not getting the money, right? We're getting the money. And so I just I'll try to package it in some way so that it looks more like an output that will count as a publication that we're at least co-authors on, but it's going to be tricky.
Well, I think something like that's probably the way to do it. Again, it's not we're demanding publications, so we have pedagogical tools if they're shareable. So, what I was saying before, if they have an approach with data showing how effective it is that's instantiatable somewhere else, creating that public shareable thing is a valuable output.
Okay.
But also, what I hear from you is you want to get the word out about what they're doing and how they're doing it and what the metrics are. And that sounds like something you might build a team on that wouldn't take much work from them. It just requires them to share it with you.
Right.
To figure out how to.
And it's a two-way street. We're trying to learn from them.
Right.
And but we're also trying to teach them stuff, because they're not very systematic in social science sort of methods and philosophical methods. So they're getting there. And so it's this very interdisciplinary thing that we have to find a common language, and we have to find common methods and common ways of articulating our results and things like that. So just find something shareable, and and if possible, try to create some publications that maybe involve their work, but we're kind of bringing it to the world. Is
Perfect.
that the right idea?
That is the right idea.
Okay.
Thanks, Sally.
Thanks.
Let me invite one last person, Takunda, and then we'll wrap it up. But I'll be available at 2 points next week.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So my question is also kind of like a logistical question, and I don't know that there's much you can do about it this cycle. Um, but it's such a short turnaround from the notice and invite for the full proposal to the actual submission. And I'm just like wondering how to navigate that. So my institution and the institutions of my collaborators, they do seem willing to work with us on figuring out things like the cost sharing. But for example, our budget proposal needs to be submitted to them for review by Monday. And so, like, just for internal processes for their review and for them to try to figure out everything, like, we're talking essentially 2 weeks to try to pull together everything. So, I'm just wondering maybe in the future if there can be a longer timeline or if you have suggestions for this cycle for navigating kind of trying to do the kind of thing you're telling us to do to get our budgets, kind of more refined, like what we can yeah, if there's some flexibility that might be worked in.
Introduced later. So, um, our problem is our grant is 3 years. It has to be wrapped up totally and completely in 3 years. And we didn't want to do just one call because it takes time for people to put together the short proposals, even. So we were having trouble just figuring out what the pacing could be. And we were hoping people who were hopeful of their short proposals would be working in the interim a little bit on this. But I know that's optimistic because it's hard once you've submitted the short proposal to do anything other than, believe me, I know this, say, okay, I'm done with that. Let me not invest anymore till I see what happens.
Well, and the institutions sometimes restrict that. They say we won't do anything until we actually know you're
Whether you've been
right.
invited the second round. I think that's a very important point. I'll think about it, but I don't yet see a way we can push things back and still be on a timeline with people having enough time for this first round to do some of the bigger proposals. But let me suggest that you by Monday put in a spreadsheet, a filled in spreadsheet that's a pretty smart guesstimate and get their review and approval with the explicit understanding that if you can get this, that you can revise it so that they start the review process on the budget on Monday with reasonable numbers, but then give you feedback and you revise, and you not only revise in light of their feedback, but in light of other things you've discovered. Is that feasible, do you think? Or is it give them their budget and they either approve or disapprove and you're done?
Uh, I mean, I think they are working with us, so it's helpful.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, just trying to figure out. So hopefully it works, and I will try that. But yeah, it's a tight turnaround.
We understood that from the start.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of the acceptances, we got everything out on Friday the 6th, but it wasn't early Friday the 6th.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so
I mean,
much.
all the acceptances and not the teams in search of an individual or individuals in search of a team. But okay, I'm afraid we have to call it the end. If you have an email, if you'd like to email me a question, uh, please feel free. We'll announce 2 office hours next week at different times, different days and different times of the day. And I hope I can be helpful to you guys. Talk to you later. Thanks very much.